Last time, Emperor Chūai doubted an oracle. He died. And then the Chronicles introduced a new figure, Empress Jingū. Here is what the Chronicles say she did. After her husband's death, she received a divine oracle. She crossed the sea, pregnant, leading a fleet toward the Korean peninsula. Silla surrendered without a fight. Baekje and Goguryeo submitted as well. 3 kingdoms brought under Yamato's reach. She returned to Kyushu and gave birth to Emperor Ōjin. The Nihon Shoki credits her with a regency lasting roughly 70 years. But a stone inscription on the Korean peninsula, raised in 414 AD, records the same era from the other side of the water. The Chronicles gave her a victory. The stone recorded something more complicated. Before we go further, it's worth being clear about what we actually know. The Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki treat Empress Jingū very differently. In the Nihon Shoki, she has her own dedicated section, a regency lasting approximately 70 years, a foreign campaign rendered in near miraculous terms. She is one of the most elaborately constructed figures in the early chronicles. In the Kojiki, no independent section. Her activities appear within Emperor Chūai's chapter. The extended regency the Nihon Shoki describes is not emphasized in the same way. The same figure, handled very differently by the 2 texts that are supposed to be telling the same history. We've seen this before. On the question of whether she existed, the honest answer is that we don't know. Non-existence theories have been influential. The historian Tsuda Sokichi argued for a largely legendary construction. But current scholarship holds multiple positions. Non-existence, a composite of several historical figures, a real person whose story was heavily mythologized. None of this is definitively settled. What we can say is this: the Chronicles place her era in the 3rd century. One widely cited interpretive framework, sometimes called the 120-year correction, suggests the Chronicles' early dates are systematically displaced by roughly that amount. If that framework is applied here, the period associated with Jingū's campaign falls in the late 4th century, which is when the external record begins showing Wa on the Korean peninsula. That alignment is worth holding in mind as we look at what the external record actually says. There are 2 objects from outside Japan that speak to this period. The first we've seen before, the 7-branched sword. The ceremonial iron sword at Isonokami Shrine, with the branching blades and the inscription recording its presentation by a Baekje king to a Wa king. The Nihon Shoki places this event in the 52nd year of Jingū's regency, under the 120-year correction framework that corresponds to roughly 372 AD, close to the dates most commonly cited for the sword itself. The alignment doesn't prove anything on its own, but it means the Chronicles' account of a Baekje king presenting a sword to a Wa ruler doesn't have to be read as 3rd century fiction. Read through this framework, it looks like a memory of 4th century diplomacy. The second object is the stone, the Gwangaeto stele, the 6-meter basalt inscription raised by Goguryeo in 414 AD to commemorate their king's military achievements. We looked at this in episode 9. Here I want to read it against the Chronicles directly. The stele contains a contested passage often read as recording that in 391, Wa crossed the sea and attacked Baekje and Silla. The reading is disputed, as it has been among Korean, Japanese and Chinese scholars for over a century. I'm not going to resolve that debate here, but what follows in the stele is less contested. In 400, Goguryeo dispatched 50,000 soldiers and drove Wa forces back. In 404, Wa entered the Daifang region and was defeated. Now open the Nihon Shoki. Open the Kojiki. The Chronicles describe Empress Jingū leading a fleet across the sea. 3 kingdoms submitting without resistance. A victory rendered in the language of divine mandate. The defeats recorded by Goguryeo, 400 AD, 404 AD, do not appear clearly in Japan's own record. The Chronicles said victory. The stone recorded something more complicated. What follows is not established history. This is my reading. Push back on it if you want to. Why did the Chronicles give Empress Jingū such an outsized role? My first reading. In her story, I think I can see the memory of the ritual queens. We've followed that thread across several episodes now. Himiko, the shaman queen documented in Chinese records, almost absent from Japan's own chronicles. Toyo, not preserved at all. The era of women who governed through their connection to the divine ended sometime in the 4th century. Empress Jingū in the Chronicles does something those women did. She receives divine instruction directly. She acts on it when a male ruler, her husband, would not. The structure of the story is the man who doubts the divine and dies, followed by the woman who obeys it and prevails. That structure feels like a memory. Not a record of Jingū specifically, but a residue of a time when female ritual authority was how things worked. My second reading is about the peninsula. Wa was militarily active on the Korean peninsula in the late 4th century. The Gwanggaeto stele confirms that Wa appears in the military landscape of the peninsula, even if the exact nature of Wa's role is debated. The Chronicles couldn't simply ignore the memory of that involvement, but they also couldn't present it as an unresolved military entanglement with complicated outcomes. So the memory was reorganized. The military activity became a divinely mandated campaign. The queen became the instrument of heaven's will. The resistance and the setbacks were left outside the record. And the third function, the one that may have mattered most to the people who compiled the Chronicles. Empress Jingū is Emperor Ōjin's mother. Ōjin is described as the womb emperor, a king already promised by the gods before he was born. For that to work, his mother had to be the god's representative. Jingū is not just a historical figure in the Chronicles. She is the mechanism by which Ōjin's authority is established before he draws his first breath. After Empress Jingū, Emperor Ōjin, the 15th emperor, the womb emperor, promised by the gods before his birth in his mother's story, estimated by archaeology to the late 4th or early 5th century. Under his reign, the Chronicles record a wave of arrivals from the continent. A Chiki, a scholar from Baekje, who came with horses and could read the sutras. He recommended the calling. Wang Yin, known in Japanese tradition as Wani, brought, the Chronicles say, with copies of the Analects of Confucius and the 1,000-character classic. The 1,000-character classic, however, was composed in the 6th century, well after Ōjin's time. The reference is almost certainly anachronistic. What the tradition seems to be encoding is the memory of Chinese writing and learning arriving from Baekje, with the specific text adjusted later. Yusuke no Kimi, ancestor of the Hata clan, said to have arrived with tens of thousands of followers, bringing knowledge of sericulture and weaving. The Hata clan would become one of the most significant economic and engineering forces in the early Yamato court. These accounts carry a strongly legendary character. The numbers are probably symbolic. The specific attributions may be later constructions. But the archaeology of this period does confirm a major influx of continental technology and culture. Suware, iron production, metalworking, and Korean-style cooking hearts, arriving in the late 4th and 5th centuries. The legendary accounts and the material record are pointing at the same broad phenomenon, even if the details don't align precisely. And then there is the tomb. The burial mound designated as Ōjin's is in Habikino, Osaka Prefecture. Its total length is approximately 425 meters. The second largest keyhole tomb in Japan, dated to the early 5th century. In episode 9, we watched the center of the largest tombs shift from the Miwa region of Nara to the Kawachi plain of Osaka. This tomb is where that shift completes itself, whatever we call the political configuration that produced it. The geography of power had moved. Let me bring the arc together. In 266 AD, Toyo sent a mission to China, a female ruler managing ritual and diplomacy. Then silence. In that silence, bronze bells disappeared, keyhole tombs spread across the archipelago, weapons replaced mirrors in the grave goods, and war armies appeared on the Korean peninsula. The chronicles filled that silence with heroes: Yamato Takeru, Suinin, Keiko, and with one empress who crossed the sea. The empress who received the divine command her husband refused. The Gwangai To stele records what the chronicles left on the other side of the water: the resistance, the reversal, the years when war was pushed back. The chronicles kept the victory, the stone kept the rest. And both may be true. War was active on the peninsula. War also suffered setbacks there. Military history rarely looks like either pure triumph or pure failure, and the evidence from both sides suggests this was no exception. What comes next is the tomb that makes everything else look small. The chronicles said victory, the stone said otherwise, and both were probably right. Next time, Emperor Nintoku, the largest tomb in Japan, and the story the chronicles told about it. The chronicles describe him as a ruler who looked out from his palace, saw no smoke rising from the cooking fires, and cancelled all taxes for 3 years. The tomb designated as his is 486 meters long, larger than the Great Pyramid. What does a king who emptied his treasury need with the largest burial mound in the world?